Welcome back, and welcome to my new studio. If you weren't here for my live reaction NHL draft video, anyways, let's talk about Brad Trivelling's main moves so far this summer with Reeves, Klingberg, Bertuzzi, and Domi. Starting with Ryan Reeves at 3 years times $1.35 million. He's 36 years old, I believe, and he's going to be 37 in January. I like this mostly. I think he brings the obvious intimidation factor on the ice. He lays the occasional crippling check in open ice. And he can help with the locker room as well. But if you've ever seen the Leafs down by a goal or behind in a game, they just seem so lifeless on the bench. Like there's no one saying, "Come on, boys, we can." I know I sound really cheesy doing it, but you know what I'm talking about, right? There's no one there to rally the troops. John Tavares is just so vanilla. I mean, yeah, you could say, he motivates by his play, blah, blah, blah. But they need someone with a voice on the bench and on the ice. I know Bunting didn't fight. Wayne Train was great, but he lost his legs. And you could argue that with Reeves as well. Like he said in his interview after he got signed, he's working on his cardio, his speed, etc., in order to keep up with everyone. How many minutes is he really going to play a night, right? Probably like less than 10. And in the third period, I don't really expect to see him much at all, especially if they're behind. And then even in the playoffs, how much is he going to play? 2-3 minutes? I don't know. I mean, the best teams can roll all four lines. Just look at Vegas or Tampa Bay in the past years. So I'm happy he's here. You could say the term is obviously way too long, but they had to go that far to outbid Minnesota. I think they only gave him 2 years. But it's variable, most of it, right? I think it only counts as about $100,000 if they try and waive him. Don't quote me on that, but you can look it up yourself. So this should be a good thing. I mean, there's times where I felt like he's outworn his welcome in the locker room way too fast, like in places like New York with the Rangers or in Pittsburgh where he spent a season or less. Obviously, things seem to work in Minnesota in a team that I think was really serious. Maybe he would have worked well in Dallas in that sort of way as well. So it could really be a boon for him, and I'm hoping it is. How do I grade this? I'm going to give it a B minus, maybe even a B. You could argue me up because I think the influence of him is going to help some of the other guys that they signed as well. But first, the aristocrats. No, John Klingberg. Like Jeff Merrick said, he's a punter, right? They probably at some point are going to have him on the first power play unit. That's his bread and butter. And he could really flourish there. I mean, he has the potential. His best year was in Dallas. Where in the regular season, he put up about 47 points. That was in 2021-22. And he had a really good playoffs in 2019-20, where in 26 games, he had 17 points. 21 points, -5. Of course, in Anaheim, he was awful. Had 24 points in 50 games, -28. I know not plus minus isn't end all be all, but because he was a -28 in the year before in Dallas as well, which is part of the reason why they didn't give him the big contract. That man, Heiskanen, right? But why Anaheim signed? Why did the Ducks give him $7 million? I mean, they only gave him 1 year, and the point was to flip him before the trade deadline. At least that's what I think they were going to do with him. And why would you give him more than 5.5 maximum? Because you'd want to eat at least half of that salary in the stagnant cap era because of COVID, etc., in order to get the highest draft pick possible because you're a rebuilding team, right? Or prospect or whatever. He ended up in Minnesota. I can't remember what the trade was, to be honest, but it was not that flattering, I don't think. In 17 games with Minnesota, he had 9 points, a +3. Wow. In the playoffs, he wasn't bad either in 4 games. He had 4 points. One of those were goals. He's at 5-on-5. He's such a defensive liability. You have to bury him on a third pairing. Really watch his minutes, and obviously pair him with a super defensive defenseman. I just was so disappointed. In past years, when I've heard his name tied to the Leafs, I've just, prayed to my non-religious God that does that make any sense? That the Leafs wouldn't pick him up. I know they need someone who can transport the puck, and you would think that he would have better defensive instincts because you can't teach size, as Mike Babcock used to say. He's 6'3", 185 pounds. Long reach, long stick, poke checking, stealing pucks, getting in the way of pucks. But he's not that guy. I just think they could have used the money a lot better in this instance. I mean, there's players out there like Carson Soucy, and I know he got term, and I know that was the thing with Klimberg. They only gave him 1 year, and Trevling's hands are tied somewhat because of the Nylander and Austin Matthews and blah blah blah. But still, the cap's probably going to go up next season by, I hear, as much as $7 million. Carson Soucy signed for around $3 million for about a 3-year term. I think that's a safe bet. The guy is around 28 years old, if I'm not mistaken. 6'5", 210 pounds. He can play right or left, albeit him being a left-hand shooter. I don't think Trevling's done here with the defense. Anyways, I think he's going to make a trade. More on that a little later. How do I grade this? I'm going to give it a D+, right? Because it's only 1 year, and because he has the potential. But I genuinely hate this player so much because he's very one-dimensional. Moving on to more happier thoughts here with Tyler Bertuzzi. Now, he signed for 1 year at 5.5. Amazing. He should have a really great year because he's most likely going to play in the top 6, probably with Matthews and Marner and or Nylander, where he'll probably put up career numbers. He's bigger than I thought he was too, by the way. He's that pesty sort of guy. 6'1", 199 pounds. Can play either wing, although he is a left shot from Sudbury, Ontario. He was injured a lot last season. Didn't play much for the Wings in 29 games, 14 points. Had a bad year. But when they traded him to the Bruins, in 21 games, 16 points, wasn't that great either, but he exploded in the playoffs. In 7 games, 10 points, 5 of those goals, still a -4. But in a career year back in, not long ago, 2021-22, he had 30 goals, 62 points, -11 on a Detroit rebuilding team. He is a bit of a defensive liability. Hopefully, Sheldon Keefe and the coaching staff can lock him into the Clockwork Orange room and drill at least some defensive awareness into this guy's head. That's all, just a little bit more than he has already, which is not much. But I'm going to give this signing an A. You could argue me up to an A+. Next is, I almost said Ty, but Max Domi at 1 year, $3 million. This seems like destiny, doesn't it? Because, he used to play with Mitch Marner in the OHL. Brad Trevling was the assistant manager in Arizona when they drafted him. His father, Ty Domi, is a very notorious Maple Leaf, well-loved. And he's had some rough years, hasn't he? Ever since he left Montreal. But when he got to Chicago, he sort of reinvigorated his career. Did I mention? I mentioned already 1 year at $3 million. In Chicago, in 60 games, he had 18 goals, 49 points, -9 on one of the crappiest teams in the league. So I'm not going to read too much into that, although his defensive game isn't great. He's a lot like Alexander Kerfoot, but better offensively and not as good defensively. Really, that's how he is. He's a better passer. He's a better scorer. Of course, not as good on D. And then when he was traded to Dallas, He wasn't too spectacular in 20 games where he had 7 points, -6. But in the playoffs, he showed he had the grease, the snot, whatever you want to acronym you want to throw in there. In 19 games, he had 13 points, only 3 goals, but a -3, and he brings some of that. I know he doesn't drop the gloves. He's not his dad, at least not that often anyways, but he can throw a good check from time to time. He's definitely a feisty player. Definitely he's got the gift of gab as well. And another player that, like Bertuzzi, that Ryan Reeves will help give confidence to. And I think between these 3 guys, the dressing room as well will really rise because of it. Those are my hopes anyways. That's my theory. How do I grade this Ty Domi signing? I'm going to give it an A as well. It's about the same money he made last year in his prove-it deal with Chicago, and I think he's dying for a long-term contract with this team, so I don't think it'll go that much higher than $3 million. 5 maximum, maybe not even that. We'll see. We'll see how well he does this year. Where will all these guys play, by the way? With Domi, I think you're looking at a middle 6 position, right? I think him and Matthew Nyes will be fighting for a spot with Tavares and Nylander. And he can also play center, right? But I could see him playing with Lafferty and Kampf on that 3rd line. In a pinch, he can move up. Bertuzzi, he's probably at least going to start with Matthews and Marner. Klingberg, they're going to have to bury this guy in a 3rd pairing, really watch his minutes, and hopefully he really blossoms on the power play if they give him a PP1 opportunity. Reeves, that's the 4th line for him there. Let me know how you feel about all these signings so far. I would love to hear from you down in the comment section below. I know a lot depends on Nylander and Auston Matthews moving forward, and that had to do with some of the term and money Trevling handed out. Here's my conspiracy theory, though, when it comes to I think they're going to trade for another defender. I don't think that's too wild of a theory. I want to look at Calgary because Zadorov can play left and right. There's Tanev as well. Both those guys have 1 year left on their deals. But there's something to be said about trading with an ex-GM of your team. So I don't know. But I would love to see Zadorov on this club for sure. I think that would really help things along because their defense, something really needs to change here. The bigger conspiracy that I have to offer you is that if Tampa Bay takes a step back this season, and I think they will, probably not, but is there a possibility they fire John Cooper? Because if he was available, there's no one that would pay this guy more than the Toronto Maple Leafs. Thanks for joining me today. Please give me a thumbs up. Smash that subscribe button if you haven't already. I just had a kid about a year ago. I made a big move, as I already mentioned. I'd like to help my family as much as I can through this channel. So if you'd like to help support me, I'd really appreciate it through my crowdfunding page. It's called Buy Me a Coffee. You'll see a link down in the description box below or on my homepage. And hey, I look forward to seeing you again soon. In the meantime, don't do anything too crazy out there. I like you just the way you are.